Midtown Lewis Road, and I'm very concerned because there's actually a poll about 50. It's actually on number 2 on the list. They're going to put antenna. So same concern there.
Yeah, my name's Helen. I live South Palo Alto off of Restadero. And yeah, the same concerns, the look and locking us into not being able to put underground wires in the future. So the look and feel of the neighborhood.
I'm Rich Simone. I'm Helen's husband. I also think another concern is that AT&T has already done this in the neighborhoods. Verizon is proposing to do it now. There's 2 other cellular providers, T-Mobile and Sprint, and there's nothing to say that they won't come along later and want to do it as well. And other parties like Comcast and Google may also want to get into this game. So, and they don't seem to be interested in sharing hardware. I know there's technical difficulties in doing that, what they call that multi-tenant equipment. But even if they could figure all that out, I just think it's an aesthetic problem, and I'm particularly concerned about the undergrounding issue.
How do you say no to more? You're right.
Yeah, thanks.
That's a good point.
My name is Jeannie Fleming. I'm on Webster Street. I have the same concerns that everyone else does. And I've just been looking at some of the data related to the existing small cell nodes in Palo Alto. And I can tell you that right now we have about 72 of them. In 2014, AT&T put in, I think, 50 plus, and Verizon put in 20. Verizon is now proposing 93 plus an additional 20. And AT&T has already told the city that they wish to install more of these small cell nodes themselves.
Okay, my name is Francesca Kautz. I have a lot of concerns. Some of them are up here already. One of it is the extra weight on the telephone poles, 200 pounds at least. I think that if there was an earthquake or a fire, that pole would more likely go over. So I think it's a bad idea to have them on the poles for the weight reason. They're noisy, ugly, all that stuff, we know. Also, what I really don't like is the fact that this current thing that we're talking about is all in a certain area of South Palo Alto. Let's divide it up equally between north and south. I don't know why it has to all be in the southern part of Palo Alto, in a certain area of southern Palo Alto. Also, why do we have to see it? Why can't it be underground or on some industrial building where we don't have to look at it in the neighborhood? The residential neighborhoods shouldn't have to look at it, shouldn't have to deal with it, shouldn't have to be exposed to whatever might be there. So I don't think that we should be saving Verizon money by letting them put it on our telephone poles, which may be dangerous for us. And also, I guess I've heard that the purpose for these cell towers isn't even to improve things at home, but it's for car service. So I don't know that we need that.
I'm Dave Kautz. I'm with Francesca, and I share the concerns already stated. And I'm going to be summarizing these things. What is the benefit of these towers to residents versus the risks and costs?
My name is Jilan Yu. I live in Loma Verde Avenue. That pole is in front of my house. I think it's less than 6 yards. And also, federal regulation, they have that. If AT&T have, they can share. But from my kitchen door to street, opposite street neighbor already have one. So I'm really main concern that also the house property value.
Okay. So property value plus redundancy, right?
My name is Lydia Chow. I live on Webster. I share the concerns with everybody else here, and mostly in regards to safety and noise.
My name is
Just one sec, Jerry. With respect to safety, Celia, do you mean health-wise, or do you mean the weight of the poles, or is it the whole ball of wax?
Yeah.
My name is Jerry Fan. I live off of Woodsell, and I have a lot of concerns. Just like to voice a few of them. I think most of them we've listed, but one is actually if it's to improve drivers' connectivity. These days, we have too many people using their cell phones while they're driving. Like, what's the point of improving for the drivers? And if that's the case, we all have kids or know friends that have kids. Do we really want drivers like looking on their phone because they have better connectivity and endangering our kids? Right off of I live right off of Barron, and that's like a major throwaway for in the mornings for kids to go to school. And we already have a lot of cars going through. Just imagine like one, somebody who isn't aware driving through. The other is that it is actually really noisy. So I've actually recorded one walking by, and I'd just like to play real quick here.
Testing, 1, 2, 3.
How far were you from that unit?
That was about 10 feet away.
And this is up on the pole above your head?
And recording.
So it's not quiet. And there is a pole being proposed right off of my driveway, literally 20 feet away from, where like my kids get their bike. Right?
Is that the AT&T or is that Verizon's unit?
It's Verizon's unit. So
Okay, AT&T's I've been by and they're a lot quieter.
Yeah.
The brown ones.
You haven't been by the one at Webster and Santa Rita and
We've got
Waverly
one
then?
right down the street from the Anglos Robles, and there's another one over on, I think it's Georgia.
Yeah.
And I ride my bicycle under. And
Right.
You can hear it, but I'll tell you something, the planes and even 280 traffic noises is loud. So I just wanted to think that is louder than what I've heard.
right. I mean, like, just if you're walking in your neighborhood at night, right? Like we all like to take walks in our neighborhood because it's peaceful and quiet. You walk by and starting from like 20, 30 feet away, you're going to hear this humming noise, large fan. The other thing I want to point out is the reason why there's a large fan is because there's a lot of power going through that unit. The fan is there to cool off the unit. So just imagine the amount of heat and power that's emanating from those things that requires a fan of that magnitude. So noise is definitely one. There's a lot of health concerns because it's a pole, and I don't think our pole is exactly straight. You put something up there. There's tons of technological advances, multi-tenancy, right? It's, made a good point. So many operators there that they each want to take a poll. What's our neighborhood going to become? Like just an antenna farm for these operators. Right? I think we have to stop it. We have to stop it as soon as we can. Thanks.
Yeah, I'm Kizan Chow. I live on Louis in Midtown. And yeah, we have on the proposal, there's one very close to my house, just up the driveway. I think, I totally agree with everyone already talked about all this issues we concern. And I think, even with the new technology come up, they always need the new development. But I think the Palo Alto City need to plan well, right? Instead of allow every different vendor to put something there, they talk about benefit to their customer. But I don't think everyone is for using the Verizon service, right? On a different vendor. So I think that Palo Alto City need to overall have a better planning instead of let every vendor to go in to install something there. And definitely it's not a good idea for all the problem that people already talked. And about the safety, I think, people talking about earthquake, possible liability to the city. And I agree with you said. Just 2 days ago, after the school, right, I saw a little early teen girl ride a bicycle without, two hands free, basically holding her phone and talk to the phone. I think if the improve the connectivity, what's the benefit for all people traveling along the street? Right? I don't think that's the goal for improvement. I don't think that's a good idea to improve. Yeah.
So one more data point is I have a neighbor that lives across the street from me. He has Verizon. He says, I've never had Verizon connectivity issues. Why are they putting antenna right across the street?
So, yeah.
Yeah, I don't either, and they're putting one on a pole in front of my house. And I was a Verizon customer until 2 months ago and had excellent service. So.
Sorry for
My name is Rushan. I'm a husband of Shichang. We also consider the purpose for the new installation. Because we use the phone several years, more years, so we never have the signal and the connection from inside the house or outside. We use AT&T, someone use the different vendors. So we just think the purpose is really support the residential or is have other business purpose.
I'm Steve Erbach, and I actually came in here to talk about the people that were talking about worried about radiation. Just to clear up a thing, when you go to a microcell, you actually reduce the power output from the transmitters. That's the whole purpose of going to microcells. Is not only do you cover more customers in the cell, but you make the cell smaller. So I need less power to get to your phone. And therefore, you instead of the tree, I'm going to use the big tree at Los Robos, which used to cover all our area. And now we've got some microcells. Not only do you get rid of the shadows, but you turn down the power because the phone in your pocket is radiating almost as much as that tower, believe it or not. But you're only talking from your phone to the tower. And it's a handshake, and the tower uses just enough power to get to your phone.
So I like that, like, talk about that point a little bit, right? Like, I think technologically speaking, I buy that argument that it lowers its power. However, there's also no plan specified that they're saying that Verizon, because we're reducing power, we will turn down all the big tower powers.
It's automatic.
Yes, but I don't see that as part of the building plans, right? So I call that, like, it's not in Verizon's benefit to reduce power. They want to increase connectivity for the business region. So the microcell is actually increasing coverage, which is true, but I don't see like a holistic plan for Verizon that says these are the areas that needs coverage. We have, thousands of customers that complain that they don't have coverage. And by putting these microcell up, we can actually reduce the overall power level across the entire city.
It has to be done, by the way, just because if you don't reduce the power on the big guy, he stomps on the little guy.
That's fine.
So
but
that's why
I
it's
wanna,
automatic.
Yes, but I
They-
do want
they
to.
can
I do want to hear.
negotiate, but
Yes, but I
the
do want
other-
to hear Verizon say
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, that would be a good. The other concern I have is everybody switching to cell phones? What is the backup power plan for all these microcells? Currently, they all have a tiny small battery for minutes. And if you go down to the big tree at the corner of Los Robles next to the spa, you'll see there's a big diesel generator that can run that thing for hours. They lost all this power in the big fires up in Santa Rosa area. No cell phones.
Cell phones didn't work.
Yeah, everybody's depending on landlines. That's why the reason I keep my landline is in the case of another Loma Prieta, I had phone service.
Me too.
Well, I think I can address that a little bit. Certainly what Verizon says they're doing to solve that problem is putting the battery packs on the poles that Jerry was just describing. That is the purpose of them, is to provide power when the other source, the normal source of power,
That's
isn't
just minutes.
isn't
I think it's
No,
short.
it's
isn't
real.
available. Well, and it also can be addressed in other ways. In fact, the whole issue of connectivity can be addressed in other ways through fiber optics, for example. So, I'm not sure we have to wrestle with the problem of that you are raising now in the context of this particular issue.
I'm Joel Bergquist, and I live in Old Palo Alto. And the problem for me and my family, and for obviously everybody in Palo Alto, these are nuisances. These cell towers are nuisances because they provide a lot of noise, like a whooshing sound. And as Gene mentioned, if anybody's gone down next to Steve Jobs' house and listened to that one, you can hear it from 30 feet away. Now, my side yard is 25 feet from the pole on which is a cell tower's planned to be installed. There are 2 bedrooms there, 2 bedrooms 25 feet from one of these whooshing sounds. It's like white noise 24/7. And that's just totally unacceptable. It makes my house very difficult to live in. I mean, that's an impossibility. That's a real nuisance. That's an actionable nuisance, in fact. And I would say that the radiation, although I understand that legally we cannot use that as reason to deny the cell tower installations is that there is a perception that radiation is a problem. So these will affect resale values of houses. So if somebody comes, if their perception is that radiation is a problem, they look at the cell phone in front of my house, excuse me, and they will simply bypass it. They'll go to another house. So that affects the value of my house. And as everybody here knows, housing in Palo Alto is extremely expensive. We pay a fortune to buy houses, to live in them, and we expect the city of Palo Alto will protect us. That's the function, I think, of city government, is to protect the citizenry. And that's what's necessary here. We're not in business to make money from Verizon to go into the city coffers. That's not what we're about. We're about protecting the quality of life in Palo Alto. That's primary. And I think we need to really think about that with all of these. That's the serious thing. The other issue, as other people have mentioned, is the service. And I think that we have so many cell towers around. If we continue to get them in just because there's revenue generators for the city, that destroys the quality of life in the city. And if you ruin the franchise of Palo Alto as a wonderful place to live and wonderful schools, that destroys the city. And I think this is the camel's nose under the tent, and it should be stopped. I think we should just stop it now. Other cities have done it. They've successfully avoided this the installation of these cell towers. And I think Palo Alto should do that as well. And there's no reason not to. I mean, I don't know what revenue is generated. Can you tell us what revenue is generated by that?
Not a lot. I mean, at least I don't think so, because I don't see it. It's not big enough for me to line that.
Yeah. So then there's no real reason. There's no incentive for Palo Alto to keep these. But there's every incentive for the citizens not to have them. So that's sort of my long and short. Well, we have other things that I can discuss it, but that's my primary.
But the city does make more money off of the small towers.
I don't know.
You know, I do
Well, they
know.
do.
Okay, I do know that.
They told us that at that.
Yeah,
meeting.
Verizon pays $270 a year to Palo Alto for each installation. And probably the right way to think about this from Verizon's point of view is that to put in a macro tower, which has about a mile and a half radius of coverage, it costs them $4,000 to $5,000 a month to rent a site like that. But to have the quarter-mile radius coverage of a small cell node, like what they want to put by your house, only costs them $270 a year in rent. And moreover, and this is the point I think Jim was raising, the liability for the pole in the latter case is ours. As taxpayers in Palo Alto, we are liable for what happens to that pole. But when Verizon erects a pole and puts it on a commercial site, they're liable for that pole. So it is win-win for Verizon on this plan.
So I think what you're saying is the micro towers save Verizon money.
A tremendous amount of money. Yes, and not just the quality of life. Indeed, it adds a liability for us with respect to their, as Francesca was saying, they put hundreds of pounds of equipment on these poles.
I think we need the cell towers because the cell can only handle so many calls. You know, I'm a Navy, like ex-Navy electronics technician, so I can address radar power and I can address the cell, a little bit on the cell towers. You can only handle so many calls on a cell tower. Part of the reason they went to micro centers was that each one of those mini cell towers can handle the same amount of people that the big one did. So they offloaded traffic. So we've got more and more people. How many people here have more than one cell phone in their family? Nobody's talking? You don't have? Yeah, we all have.
But we don't talk all the time all together.
You need connectivity.
But the issue,
one of the ways is
the issue isn't connectivity. I'm
Yeah,
perfectly
right
fine
now
with connectivity.
Another problem is this is only for Verizon customer, maybe, and even not for residents, right? We're talking about for the people traveling through it. And the Verizon customer traveling through Palo Alto
It's for
Street.
drivers.
That's what
Yeah,
Mary
I don't
Dish
think
actually said.
Yeah.
Yeah, she actually, when I talked to her in person, she actually said this is to improve the traffic and for people's quality of service
Well,
passing by.
Okay, let's just talk for a moment on that because it's technical. When somebody drives through a cell, the cells communicate between the cells and your phone. Who's got the better signal is one of the things that's being passed back and forth. And they pass your phone off to the cell. So somebody with a phone on in their pocket drives through Palo Alto, you're being handed off down the way. Even if you're not talking, it's keeping track of where you are. You watch the TV movies, yeah, they make it a lot simpler than it is, but yeah. So you enter Palo Alto, that pole has to pick you up. Then you hands it off to the next pole as you check in, and you're working through the cells. So it's not just for drivers to talk on the phone. The fact that you're even in town with a phone on, it's keeping track of you.
Which is
So
fine
they
for,
might
which
get
is
a call,
fine,
but
which
that's
is
what
like,
you just implied. That's what they were doing. They're handing off.
and
one
current
phone
service is
to
fine
improve
for,
the
Yeah,
service.
but you don't, what are you gonna do? They're gonna take a connection. There's no blocking on a connection. In other words, you're a resident, and he's a guy with his car driving through. I'm gonna say there's 256 connections. You're the 257th connection. You come in, but you're closer to the pole, so the pole picks you up and throws you away for the duration.
yeah,
Are
but
See what I mean? You
just-
can't
Anyway,
talk.
I'm not
Are you
Verizon
suggesting
customer.
that Verizon's just trying to help make our traffic worse?
Yeah.
I don't know, I just,
No, traffic is a technical and telecom term, okay? When if there's a whole study of phone call patterns and everything, and it's run by the traffic department. I also had.
but I think that this meeting is not discussing about which technology is more advanced or, you know,
No, but you
I
need
think
the-
it's
you
how
need
much
the
can
phones.
benefit Palo Alto residents.
Yeah, well, it is.
Right, and not every Palo Alto resident is Verizon. I don't know how many percentage is Verizon.
Palo Alto tried to build a green city, right? Right now, if you think about the building house, the coding is become much
Oh,
higher.
yes.
Higher, yeah, probably 30-40% higher. But why we didn't consider the environment green? Why we didn't consider other green, right?
Well,
so
I think that's a great point, a really great point.
The
Isn't
thing
isn't
is to
this,
get rid of
isn't this
cell
an
phones and
element
go
of
back
our
to
environment
landlines,
that's
then you don't
critically
have any
important?
radiation. Okay, that's the whole thing. The whole problem is being created by people buying cell phones and using them.
yeah, so, I mean,
there are other solutions.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
yeah.
it's
I want to, like, one, reception for everybody here is not really an issue. But I think we can all agree that by adding the towers, it's not solving our reception issues. I think the benefit is largely on the side of Verizon, and there's a lot of negative impacts beyond just technologically
yeah.
that we will have to bear, both as residents who live in the city and as taxpayers, right? So I think that, to me, that's a broader picture that we need to focus on. Like, technologically, it's awesome that they have better technology, but like, if it doesn't apply to me, I don't really care about the technology.
So I want to keep going.
Yeah.
Okay, done.
Sorry. My name's Kay Saban, and I live over on Webster Street in Old Palo Alto, and this is a great concern.
Let's see, maybe let's start here.
I'm Gail Brewer from Old Palo Alto, and I'm come to listen. I'm Melody, and I'm in the neighborhood. I have all those concerns, and I also want to add, so I read somewhere in other cities, if they initially install small cell and later on they want to come in to add additional equipment when it becomes necessary, the approval process is much easier. So it's really a concern for me too. And another, it's not another concern. It's actually a question. It's I don't know. I know the utilities poles belong to the city, right? But as property owners, what kind of right do we have? Can we have any say in this? They pick out of all the homes, they pick 10, I think, in our cluster 3. So why these 10 homes? You know, they will be more they have a much worse impact than the rest of the neighborhood other homes. So how do cities decide on that? How they pick? We cannot just go from a technical point of view.
You're asking why they pick cell phone sales near one house versus another? Is that
Right, yes. Verizon said it's technical.
I can tell you what happened in Veterans Park on Los Robles when they came in here. They came in about 6 months in advance. They came in with a truck with a big old mast that they cranked up, and they actually measured signal levels. And they transmitted and measured, and they figured, because buildings reflect signals, and they tried to find the best place where there was a city utility pole. So they checked numbers, places where there were city utility poles. So there may be actually a better place for that cell tower, but there's no city utility pole there.
Right.
Because they don't want to pay to put in their own pole for the most
But
optimal
then
location.
they tried to figure out what the permit process in Palo Alto would be to put in your own pole.
Which is another way of saying it's a more expensive process for them.
Yeah.
Far more expensive for them to put their
I
own
would
pole up.
guarantee you that Palo Alto would probably put a 1-year delay with all the bureaucracies. I've been
In other words, the
here-
coverage is not just consider one provider. The coverage should be considered, the
For
total, yeah.
All the residents.
Otherwise,
They should
each
condense- they
vendor,
should. There's
build
two major cell phone systems, not carriers, systems. Okay, CDMA and GSM. So, yeah, they should start sharing the property. Yeah, they gotta come.
I do think the connectivity issue needs to be addressed, and people do more on their cell phones and streaming videos, that it will need more capacity. So I asked Mary once, I said, other than this utility poles, are there other options? They said they could build their own pole, a small pole. They could design really nice, pick a location that's not intrusive to any home, but city of Palo Alto has to approve.
Well, my question is actually, I have all the concerns that you have listed there, is why the city of Palo Alto is even entertaining the idea of talking to Verizon on this issue? Why are we doing it? What is the reason?
Yeah.
Why are we opening the door and having this discussion? They shouldn't be allowed to begin with. I mean, I don't understand the reason.
You can list that too, but I can just give you a nutshell. The main issue is, you heard of the FCC, Federal Communication Commission. It's a federal issue. That's one of the big reasons. So like we cannot regulate the airways ourselves as a city. It's a federal issue, not a local issue. That's why. Anyways.
My name is Ahmed Balek. We both live in Emerson. Since I agree with all the issues which are already there in the position, I'd just like to mention one long-term issue. I understand that at some point, City of Palo Alto put its poles on, put the electricity distribution on the ground. And for whatever reason, they stopped doing that for half of the city. My hope is that at some point in the future, they start doing that for the entire city, because obvious problems which these overheads are going to have is after you allow Verizon, following Verizon with other vendors to come in, I wonder if that doesn't become a big blocking force for any future decision the city of Palo Alto sooner or later has to make.
So you're concerned that if you allow them to do this, it will stop the undergrounding? Is that the idea?
Yes. I think it becomes at least a big blocking factor. And now we are going to get all kinds of lawsuits and everything else that prevents us from doing it. And I think that's a huge cost factor that the city has to consider.
I'm Tina Chang in Barron Park, and people have mentioned most of the main issues. My main concern is health issues that have not been studied. A lot of people cite things that are really old about safety from wireless radiation, and there's a lot of new research that doesn't get the press it needs to. There's good resources from UC Berkeley, from researchers there in public health that study the effects of cell phone radiation, and I don't think a blanket statement like, oh, smaller towers are lower radiation compared to a big tower has anything to do with exposure in an individual's location. It should be a good point about how do you choose one house over the other. They can certainly pick another, and that's an equity fair issue, like why one versus the other. So until someone presents really good safety studies and it addresses all of the other alternatives, undergrounding, all these other things, wireless, different modes of doing things, I need more Wi-Fi, kind of not 4G, 5G. This isn't something that would be accepted just because somebody is saying, oh, there's no studies or there's no issues.
So I also just want to say, like in Berkeley, the city has been very strong about laws for wireless safety. If you go to buy a cell phone in Berkeley, there's a big tag on it that says when you buy cigarettes, it says this product may cause harm to your health. It seriously says that with a humongous sticker. I can't remember exactly what it says on there, but they have opposed these local towers in Berkeley, and we can do the same thing here. We just have to find the right steps before.
Hi, Councilmember Greg. I'm Willie Lai. I recognize you I've opposed a few cell tower installations. One at near Palo Elementary School, where my kids go to school. Another one at the Little League on Middle School. I remember seeing it as at the town hall meetings for those as well. First off, I just want to thank you for having this meeting and letting us voice our concerns and hearing our concerns. Through some of these previous installations, I haven't necessarily felt that the city has been interested in hearing the concerns the residents have, so I applaud you for that. I'm very hopeful that there's a way to figure out a responsible way to go about preventing this, because I understand there's concerns from both sides, and I'm in the mobile industry, so I'm not opposed to the technology, but I'm also an architect of training in environmental design, so I believe there's a responsible way to plan for how connectivity is addressed. So I'm hopeful that as part of this initial effort and reaching out to the city, it's something that achieves the connectivity that we need, but does it in a responsible way that doesn't have the negative impacts that all of these residents are concerned about, which I share. About every one of you as a resident of this area.
Is it the same thing that's online?
Yes.
I've done it online.
Brian Chan, I live in Midtown. So I agree with most of the points that everyone brought up. And one of the main points that I'm most concerned about is the health issue. And it's a little, there are papers and research showing plus and minuses, whether it's, there's any effect of this sort of radiation on people's health. And what people have found in various studies, there are not a ton of studies, but the major studies that have been performed have showed that with cell towers, if you are living or farther than 1,000 meters from a cell tower, the health effects are none, essentially. Okay, and that was in the British Medical Journal, published a couple years ago. However, there have been two other studies. One study was a short study that was published in the International Journal of Cancer Prevention, where they actually looked at a small town. This study was set in Israel, one town which had one cell phone tower in the middle of the town. And the town also only had one medical clinic. And what the researchers did was they tracked every single individual in the town for over a period of 8 years. And during that 8 years, they tracked all the different health issues. There's only one medical clinic for everyone. And they found that the people who lived within 1,000 meters of this tower had an increased incidence of cancer by a significant, like 4-fold or something like that. The research for small cell towers, these microcells, there is essentially none. But industry, Verizon, AT&T, what they'll say is, well, the power's lower. It's lower power. But that's not the issue. The issue is actually long-term chronic exposure to this sort of radiation. Now, if you're living next to a tower, right, it doesn't matter if you're using your cell phone or not. The tower's always on, and you're going to be exposed chronically while you're sleeping, while you're doing nothing, right, watching TV. You're going to be exposed. So what is the long-term health effects of that? We don't know. Do we really want to find out here? Is this really an important experiment for us to test on ourselves? Does that even make sense? I don't think it makes sense. And so really, as everyone have said, the real benefit for this project is Verizon, right? It's really Verizon's for their future business planning to get 5G, signal for everybody, and for people really just traveling the city. I don't agree with that. I think it's something that we as citizens need to stand up against. I believe that if it's an issue that city council isn't able to address. I do think that we need to bring it up to higher levels. I actually moved from Hayward because they weren't able to deal with the city council cell phone tower proliferation very well, and they basically let everybody put up any towers anywhere. And so I moved here, but now we're going to do the same thing. The other thing I want to mention is that Verizon and these industries, they use these consultants, in this case Manipulum, to come down and do all their dirty work. And I believe that it's very important for us to get Verizon at the table, okay? Not through these consultants. The consultants are paid to basically push this agenda through. So Verizon kind of hides in the corner. They don't, so in Hayward, when we had this issues, we brought it up to our Congressman Pete Stark, and he came down hard on this. He actually wrote letters on our behalf to the president of Verizon. There was another Verizon call. And so after that, consultants were pushed out of the way, and we got Verizon at the table. We had roundtable meetings with Verizon about what they were doing in the city of Hayward. Unfortunately, at that time, unbeknownst to us, there was a huge proponent of Verizon within the city that basically was working against us. We did not know that at the time. And so you may know the principal author of SB 649 was Assemblyman Bill Quirk. At that time, he was actually the city council member in the city of Hayward. We had no idea that he was, actually against all this. But so that's why it was very difficult for us to push anything through in Hayward. So anyways, Hayward now has small cell towers everywhere. It's got towers right next to schools, right? And at the same time, it did not actually improve connectivity for people. It was mind-boggling. But anyways, so I really think that this is something that I think it would be great for the city council to step up and look at. I think it's something that the planning commission needs to look at, not the architectural review board. And then on top of that, I think we need to get our local representatives involved, higher up, and to get Verizon at the table so they can see that we're not, we're to really hear our concerns and not have it filtered through a consulting firm.
Great. Well, first of all, thank you everyone for giving feedback. I think we got a lot of issues listed here. We have about 15 minutes left, and what I like to try to do with the remaining time is, I'm not sure if you guys have heard of the concept called Lucky Bucks, but we have a humongous list of issues here, and we're going to certainly try to address all of them. But what I want to do is try to prioritize some of it. I think some of these issues are more important to some people than others, and so what I'd like to do is for everyone to think about, look at this board. Hopefully everyone can see it. I know it's super fun. Maybe everyone should read it out for everyone, but not yet. But what I'd like you guys to do to help just prioritize, because we're trying to tackle this issue, but there's some big issues, right? One issue is jurisdiction, right? So city council actually doesn't have a lot of jurisdiction, like power over this. That's what I'm finding out from our city attorney, that there's a lot of jurisdiction, like it's much more federal or state issue than a local issue. And so what I want to do is I'm trying to help prioritize some issues so that we can make some headways on things that are most important. So I'll have Ezra read this all off. He's trying to group some of this stuff together. And then for everyone to basically think of what are their top 3 issues, right, that you would want us to try to address. And what I'm doing with this is, thanks to help from various residents, put together a colleagues level so that we could actually address some of these issues. Hopefully all of them, but probably not. So everyone should look at the list, think of the top 3 ones I think care most about, and when Ezra reads it off, raise your hand. Okay.
Maybe we want to pass out maybe forms, paper.
No, I don't think we have to touch that. That'd be too hard.
Instead of make less money, would you please change that to adversely affects home values?
We have that. It's property values.
Oh, there it is. Okay, thanks.
Hey, can I just say something? So, having posed several cell tower installations, I am also very concerned about health and radiation. There's several of these topics.
We should probably put together.
However, it's not been useful as a basis for an argument opposing cell towers. So, if we just say that suddenly that rises to the top, but we can't do anything about it, like as for me, it's more important, how do we come up with a plan to oppose it rather than say, use a feudal basis for.
Because that's a federal issue.
Right, exactly. So it's like, I have that.
Yeah.
I would definitely do it.
I don't believe
Because
that
there
the
is a-
city
there is
council
several-
does not have power to do this. The city council can basically overrule the city attorney. You know, if the city attorney's telling you, let's find out why they're saying it. In terms of the health issue, companies will always fall back on the FCC standards, but those are very archaic standards.
So you asked for a vote. We have 3 votes apiece.
3 votes apiece, yes.
All right.
Okay,
Go
so
ahead.
actually,
But I agree with you that, yeah, that's, we may worry about all these things, but what is the actual way that we can?
well, so that's actually a good point. Is that,
for the house.
Which is
Well,
what
Yeah,
I.
but will the other things matter?
Yeah. Because when I was opposing it, I don't mind, it doesn't matter. If you find even the most recent scientific studies that it does in fact cause cancer, if federal legislation says you cannot use that as a basis.
so that's something else to keep in mind is that some of these issues, city council has zero control over, like radiation. Can't do anything about that. That's not a city council thing. That's an FCC thing, right?
So use money. You just said that AT&T is paying a paltry sum to rent space on the pole. Make that number up big enough that it becomes iffy.
So that's true. Right?
That
There's
you
some-
can do
there's
that,
some-
and the
there's some-
FCC says you
Yeah,
can't
there's
do
some things
it.
that we have a lot of control over. Yeah.
And money
Pole rent,
is one of them.
like pole rent, and some other ones like radiation, which you got to write to your congressman, right? Because I can't do anything about that.
Councilman, I think the different approach is you tell us what control we do have. And I think that should be
to
the
be honest,
priority.
I am still trying to figure this out. Right?
You-
Because
I'd like to jump in and just give some context here. Other cities have been successful in doing this. For example, the city of Piedmont, excuse me, within the last 2 weeks has denied approval to 8 proposed small cell node sites in their city. What they did was get a terrific telecommunications attorney to work with their city council to write a very tough ordinance with respect to these kinds of installations. And then they demanded that city staff in Piedmont implement as aggressively as possible those new ordinances. And it is successful. As I said, within the past 2 weeks, Piedmont has said no, denied approval to 8 proposed installations in Palos Verdes in Southern California. Exactly the same thing is going on. In the past 24 months, they have successfully denied over and over again these kinds of installations in their residential communities. And moreover, I'm using too many moreovers, but they have not been sued by Verizon or AT&T or anyone else. Their experience is what happens is if a city keeps saying no to these micro sites, eventually the cell companies decide they're going to have to approach this another way in your town. And so they stop filing applications for them.
Right, so one second. I'll let you just give a new from this 2 minutes. 1 minute.
Yeah. Sorry I'm late. Rob Weiland, live on Laurel Avenue. I'm an AT&T customer, so I don't have a direct interest in this particular proposal, but I came by to represent the position that I assumed was in the minority, that Verizon is actually doing a public service to the town by offering to improve cell coverage for their customers. And given that we have extremely limited control over it, and there's never been any evidence of harm from these cell sites, and to the extent there was, a low power cell site is superior to high power, more intrusive alternatives, that we really shouldn't be wasting time opposing this. We should be thanking you for doing it and smoothing the path.
Okay. We do have a connectivity issue up there somewhere.
That is my brief, that's my brief intro.
Well, I would just like to say, back to the majority of the chair, is why are we even, I don't even think we need to vote on the issues.
No,
Why can't we
so
just?
the reason why I'm trying to do this is because I wanted to, we have at least a dozen more issues listed on the board here. And what I'm trying to do is, I'm trying to address the most high impact ones first. And so it's prioritization is important because it also lets me know where I focus my time on.
But if the FCC has the regulation.
Then I'll go to the next one.
But-
So there's some stuff
right.
that is totally outside my control.
Right, but why don't we just go to the other cities and find out how they got it
I
done?
am
and
slowly doing that.
Okay.
Let's go ahead with this vote.
Okay.
'Cause that's what.
Okay,
So 3 votes.
okay,
per
so,
person.
yeah, so 3 votes per person.
But can you read the list first?
Yeah,
Because
sure.
otherwise
So
we
why
don't know
don't you
which one.
read it
we
off?
want.
Okay, noise, radiation, who's
And
liable.
also, here's the other thing. If people see that there's something that should be grouped together, say something and we'll group it together.
Okay,
Yeah, health and
Yeah.
radiation.
So why don't you group it together? If that's true. No, no, just draw an arrow or something like that.
okay. Aesthetic will only continue slippery slope, underground issue
Okay, that one's super vague. I don't think. What was?
Which one?
will only continue.
Yeah, yeah.
I think that's like opening the door. Once you put something on the pole, then the cell companies have like they don't.
Or once you let 2 companies do it, then you gotta let the 3rd company.
Yeah.
You have to let all
So
providers.
Sets a precedent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, precedence. basically.
And then 72 towers already.
But wait, that's not. We gotta.
Okay, yeah, I'll put that. Okay. Weight on the pole, earthquake liability.
Well, may not be true, but that's something that someone brought up.
Okay, and then property value, that was a big one. Driving and texting with better connection. Floor planning.
No, that's a bad.
This one is that it's really not towers.
Yeah.
That's what that is.
That's fine.
This one was more that driving testing liability.
It is a lot.
Oh, okay, that's true. So, okay, that's true. Okay.
And then floor planning,
That's
no
the
benefit, already connectivity, and then no connection. No backup
Sorry,
plan,
I must have misspoke.
nuisance, connectivity.
What do we define as nuisances?
I think,
Noise and radiation.
Okay, so I guess we can just cut it down.
and then connectivity to the people.
Connectivity is the same as there was a. I think it was like no.
Backup plan.
Well, it's kind of opposite of this one.
Yeah, it is.
It's kind of the reverse. So we still.
Yeah. And then do the towers benefit residents or people driving through? Should not have discussions in the first place. Should we
Wait,
really?
what does that one mean?
So brought that one up.
I think there's.
Yep. And can you clarify what you mean by?
My question was why Palo Alto was entertaining the idea of negotiating with Verizon. We don't have to do that. I mean, what is the reason that cities got into this discussion?
The purpose of the
benefits,
purpose of the new
Why
installation.
are we letting them in? That's my question.
I think it's similar to this slippery slope of the second person.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
And then should we really test on each other? I think
Guinea pigs.
Should we really be guinea pigs?
Yeah, that's
Should we be
radiation.
Okay, there's one you deleted and then you're turning.
yeah, it's slippery slope.
Precedence. That's the one you want.
Okay, so does everyone can
Yeah.
I
We
have
have
one
one-
comment about this poor planning. I think it's not clear. Basically, the idea is that Palo Alto City should have overall planning to improve the, say, cell tower coverage for all, right? Instead of a per company, every company come in. I think the city of Palo Alto should have the power of, say, regulate this or not regulate this, but kind of planning how to go ahead.
I'm confused by what we're doing here. So let me just put it this way. My understanding is that cities, whether it's Palo Alto or Piedmont or Berkeley or Palos Verdes, they only have a limited number of tools with which to object successfully to these kinds of installations. And mostly they fall under the rubric of ordinances with respect to noise and ordinances related to aesthetics. That's one of the reasons why the Architectural Review Board is the board that looks at this issue. So all these other things are simply not, they are, objectively speaking, they are not on the table for consideration.
So Gina, I agree with you on this, but I think the main thing is there are certainly limits to what city council could do, right? I'm becoming more and more aware about this as I dig into this topic. But for the purposes of just understanding people that came out this weekend to talk about this in terms of big issues, I like to know what they are, right? Because we have so many different issues. Now, what can we use to do to actually oppose things is a different story. But I think right now, just understanding people's priority would be a good first step. So why don't you, Ezra, why don't you read it off, and then if you
Raise your hand when you're.
only 3 times.
Yes.
So,
Yeah, so noise.
so count your hands.
It's almost unanimous.
I think that the noise should be put in
25.
green environment. That the
25.
Is that?
Yeah, pretty much everybody. Radiation.
Well, that's a non-issue.
That's a
It's
non-issue.
non-issue.
Yeah, use your
It's
votes.
Come on, it's
That's a
on the
non-issue.
table.
They
That
can't-
would be,
But one
Yes.
thing we're sure is that Greg Tanaka, pardon me, cannot do anything about that one. So
So do not use your votes.
No, don't waste your vote on that.
Who is liable?
That one is.
The
liable.
the liability of
Not
the.
like earthquake.
Well, how about putting it in broader terms?
Yeah.
What does this cost the city of Palo Alto?
Right.
What does this cost us?
It's
And
expensive.
liability is part of that issue. We are liable now for a pole that has an additional
Wait.
200 pounds of equipment
So
on it.
that's I think that's the big one, right? Do the tower benefit residents or?
Okay,
Yeah,
so
that actually goes, yeah, that is the same,
It's a liability.
the weight on the pole and the liability.
Yeah,
Pretty
then
much the
the
same.
weight on the pole of liability, yes.
okay, so we can just switch it out.
Actually, whether we should
Put together.
someone brought it up is how much you charge for pole lights.
Yeah, rent.
Rent.
I think there was one that says don't make too much money, or isn't that the one?
I don't think that's in the city's purview here.
Yeah.
I don't
What's the
think-
benefit to the residents?
Yeah,
That's
kind of,
the-
right?
They do charge rent, but it's limited.
Oh.
Right. Oh, wait a minute. What kind of, do you need pink or brown?
any color.
Just both. Be more emphatic. There you go.
We're running out of time now, so we kind of have to wrap this up. So just go ahead with the vote. Tom.
Okay, so Ren.
It's a deterrent.
Well, yes, as a
That's a
deterrent.
Well, we just signed a master license with these people that set it at $270.
Yeah, we can't.
That's
move on.
over.
No, no.
That's a technique, not
Saying
a
if you-
So we can just go ahead with the voting and not.
We
try to-
just
If
signed
they
a
give you
master
$10,000,
license
then we
that
allow that
set
or
this
not?
price.
Exactly.
Right,
Brent
I
shouldn't
just
like,
The only
yeah.
Yeah, I
people
don't-
other people's
Take-
votes
That's
not
not,
everyone-
yeah, that's one of the fact, but not that important.
I don't want to make this kindergarten where everyone has to close their eyes.
Aesthetic?
Aesthetics, everyone,
Everybody's
everyone.
right.
This is it. This is where all the action is here.
All the other cities have proposed aesthetics.
Only one of the levers the city.
It's ugly, it's bulky, it has to be undergrounded, it has to be put someplace where it can't be seen. You can't look out your windows and see it. You can't apprehend it when you ride by it on your bicycle.
Sets a precedent.
Sets a precedent. It's already been said. And there's never been any successful mitigation of
The
that.
doors, the doors.
Prevents undergrounding?
Prevents it.
What was that? Could you repeat that?
This makes it harder for us to go underground later.
How about expressing that one a different way, which is not just with respect to preventing slowing down undergrounding, but rather that Verizon and every other cell company has in essence targeted neighborhoods that have above ground utilities because it's much cheaper for them to put this industrial type equipment on our existing wooden poles than to erect a pole of their own and have to put in very sleek looking, much smaller, and much more efficient equipment. So for them, the very cheapest thing they can do is to take one of our existing remaining wooden poles and put that ugly hundreds of pounds of noise and radiation emitting equipment on it.
So you're in favor of having Verizon apply to erect poles, dedicated poles for the purpose of putting up cell sites?
I am in favor of Verizon not seeking the cheapest, quickest, best for their bottom line way to produce connectivity.
Okay, so we are out of time now, so we can just go ahead and go to the vote without.
So weight on the pole, the liability versus pay.
That's covered.
That's
right?
all, that's easy to put together.
Let's do like rapid fire here.
Okay,
So
so
Raise your hand if
We have a full earthquake violation.
you want to bring your everything.
No, we did number 3.
Yeah.
I think we did.
You can apply for it together when you get around to it.
Concentrated in South Palo Alto, only in South Palo Alto, not in all Palo Alto.
I think Francesca wants to revise that.
I wasn't aware that there was anything up in North Palo Alto.
So we can
So
skip
take it out.
Yeah, okay, property value.
Yeah, that's.
You know, I think Joel Berquist made a great point, which is it doesn't matter when it comes to home values what the actual impact of radiation is on health. If home buyers believe that there's a negative impact, then it does have plays a role in home values.
Better connection, there's better connection people will text or drive.
Yeah.
No.
No, okay. Or planning for all. No benefit, there's already connectivity,
Yeah.
no backup plan. Okay,
It's all together, right? Backup plan is all.
Let's keep going.
so yeah, connectivity. Okay, do the towers benefit residents or people driving through?
I think that's mainly a question about, you know,
Yeah.
how
Yeah.
Palo Alto City
No, I think we got
should
that.
stand up for its residents instead of
So
for
two votes,
Verizon.
Two votes, okay?
And then
On the one above.
Wait, no, not that one.
On the one above.
What about?
and then
I vote more than three
should not have
times.
discussions in first place.
But I think it
Okay.
doesn't
All right.
summarize.
We are over time.
Thank you all for coming. Thank you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
The AT&T people put in the small cells, they brought in, I don't know if you went to any of those meetings, they brought in
No.
real estate people.
We
that
already signed it.
had done studies
You
about
said
how
that
it
there-
didn't impact property
Yeah.
value.
There are studies that show the opposite.
They didn't bring those up.
That's good. They didn't bring those guys.
Yeah.
Are you on our mailing list, by the way?
I've received multiple emails from you, so I guess that I am.
All right, good. Well, it's nice to meet you.
Right to meet you.
I think goes to Kay. Yeah.
Thank you very much for organizing this. Yes.
Oh,
We want to meet some people.
Thank you so much for coming.
Jilan. Jilan. How do you spell that? Jilan.
Okay, now I know who
Okay.
you are.
All right.
Yeah. Nice to meet you in person. And nice to meet you guys in person. Thanks for coming. I thought you made lots of great points.
They should just keep their towers on their nodes on their pedestrian buildings.
They have other ways to do it. They can put their own fiber optics out. Never see it. And it would be great connectivity.
Yeah.
But that's much more expensive.
Yeah, sure. $4,000 a month, that's okay. They'll be making millions.
Thank you so much, Joel. Thanks very much for doing this. Yeah, appreciate it. Try to make your Sundays.
Yes,
Probably has too many of them.
No, it's nice to figure out who you are, yeah.
Thank you very much.
I don't study this, but I actually did a project on this like 4 years ago.
I did. Okay, thank you so much. I'm gonna do it. You didn't take it.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Yeah. I actually don't know because I wasn't here, but I
Maybe
but I have I could get
that's what I mean.
connections.
That's really what I mean. Here.
Like the professor who posts on